Good day, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of Ferg's Footy Fanfare. I'm here once again with Ned. How you going, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks, Jay. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. And obviously, we're doing this episode to review the week one of finals. And I do have a bit of a bone to pick with you, actually, for our loyal listeners would realize that in episode 15, Ned referred to me as a Bruce McAvaney type, which some people might take as a compliment, but I took that a bit to heart for saying there was going to be an excellent first week of finals from an all-round footy perspective. And, I just wanted to say this to you, Ned. You can go and shove it, mate, because that is the best first week of footy finals I reckon I've ever seen, and I think the stats would back it up.
Nah, first week 2017 finals are pretty
But in all honesty, from a neutral standpoint, I know both of our teams played. Every game, had you really watching until the final siren, essentially. It was a great week of footy.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Probably the two qualifiers, probably they sort of decided, in the last half of the final quarter. But the two eliminators were absolute. They were fantastic.
Yeah, pulsating, edge of the couch kind of stuff. So we may as well get stuck straight into it. On Thursday night, we had Port Adelaide make their way into a preliminary final, 16-point victors over Geelong. How did you find that game, Ned?
I thought Geelong were very wasteful in that first half. Geelong probably had every right to be a couple of goals up, and inaccuracy really killed him. Obviously, Tom Hawkins kicking 5 behinds and 1 out on the full didn't help him. But Port really flexed their muscles in that second half and were able to sort of keep a real steady lead. And whenever Geelong were able to, fight back and, get within 2 goals, Port were able to find a nice, easy response.
Yeah, spot on. It's very interesting. Obviously, Port Adelaide had that dominant period throughout the majority of the third quarter, and they were able to kick a couple goals ahead. But honestly, I think the scoreboard probably it doesn't really reflect how tight the game really was. And that comes down to Geelong's wastefulness. If you just look at it purely on scoring shots, I think Geelong ended up having 4 more scoring shots. And, what you said is correct about Tom Hawkins and potentially being wasteful on a few opportunities. But that's where you need to give full credit to Port Adelaide and the way they were able to defend Geelong and send them out really wide in their forward 50 entries. So to give them tough shots on goals. So there's not too many of those 5 goals, 12. I know Stanley missed one earlier on. But other than that, there wasn't a huge amount that, they'd consider gettable goals.
Yeah, so I asked you... I was there a couple of weeks ago, or the episode leading in towards the finals. Is Geelong too reliant on Tom Hawkins? He had 6 shots on goal. Does that make them a bit too reliant on him and not being able to find other avenues? I know if he probably kicks 3, they probably win the game. But
yeah. Oh, look, I don't think the reliance is an issue. Of course, they'd love someone else down there, and I've always been a little bit confused this whole season why they're not playing Josh Jenkins and stuff like that, who would be a really valuable input for them, I'd feel. And you saw Stanley get down there a couple of times and he looked like he was going to turn it on in the first quarter. So ideally, I think they'd like someone to go in tandem with him, but I don't think that their reliance on him is too much of an issue. The only time it seems to be an issue is when he kicks 5 behinds. So
that's right.
The call I do think Geelong made correct was going with Atkins instead of Jack Stephen. I thought that Atkins was very good in that defensive role. He was key. He kept at the beginning of the game, he tended to nullify, aim on and all that. But at the end of the day, Port Adelaide's inside mids were just huge. Wines had a big game. Rockcliffe had a huge game for that being his first final.
Yeah, Robbie Gray was sensational as well.
Yeah, so now we see Port Adelaide go into a prelim and Geelong losing. They're going to have to play Collingwood next week, but we'll get to that in a little bit of due course. But that'll be an interesting game also. So then we moved to the Friday night and we had Lions win by 15 points against your mob, Richmond. How did you find that game there? Because as we said earlier on, it was really good viewing and it was a tight contest for the majority of the game.
Ill-disciplined is what I'll say. There's a few other things I could say, but I'm not going to say because, we've got to keep it sort of neutral and all that. But yeah, I thought Richmond were very ill-disciplined. They really turned up in the first half and then just weren't able to back it up. And I think the crowd factor might have been a thing. That crowd was really electrifying, and I think that was a big factor in Brisbane getting over the line.
Yeah, a very interesting fact that I was learning about throughout the game was that you guys seem to dominate clearances, and that's not necessarily your strong point throughout the season. So do you think that affected the way you guys were able to move forward or kind of get that surge mentality footy going? Or do you think that worked in your favour?
It's sort of hard when you lose the free kick count and concede 450-metre penalties. But, you are right there. And I think it was a really slippery ball. And I also think that missing Tom Lynch was a massive thing. I thought there was just no real continuity going forward. I thought Chol was flying at everything, but just doesn't have, the jukes that Tom Lynch has. But Richmond they'll learn from it. And I've heard from Trent Cotchin saying that he doesn't mind having to not have the week off because it keeps some somewhat normality throughout the finals.
That's right. And that's something that we, discussed quite in depth last week about the continuity that teams, some people like to have and some enjoy the week off. I want to make notes just about Brisbane. I thought that they really focused on trying to move the ball quickly and tried to send, head through the corridor. I think that's probably the best way to go about beating Richmond, not allowing them to get set up behind the ball. But I thought they executed it really well at times. And to be able to do that in particular, in the first quarter, stay in the contest, Lachie Neale didn't have a touch, which was well documented. I just thought it was a great game. I think Tom Lynch, I'd assume, is coming in next week. So he'll be a huge in. I think if he was in this week, it would have been with inside a goal and much closer.
Yeah, so two potential changes for Richmond that I've heard earlier will be Lynch for Chol and Broad for Pickett.
Okay, yeah. I didn't see a great deal of Pickett. And, is there any reason for Pickett coming out for Broad? They're not necessarily the same position, so...
Well, Broad actually plays in the scratch matches. He's been playing here, there, and everywhere. Sort of doing like what Josh Caddy does, goes back when he needs to, plays on the wing or goes half forward. In my honest opinion, I think you'd nearly keep Pickett in because obviously we'll dive into this later in the week. But I think St Kilda, being the very fast-tempoed team, you probably need a bit more pace.
No, it's a fair enough call, and you're right. We'll make sure that we have another episode uploaded that will review week 2 of finals. But as you said, we'll touch on the next game. So the Saturday twilight game where St Kilda got up against the Dogs by 3 points. And boy, that's heart and mouth kind of stuff. Even, obviously a bit biased from St Kilda standpoint, but even just neutral viewing, you think Saints have got it sewn up by 4 goals with 7-8 minutes left, and to almost pull off one of their clinical little capitulations was very stressful watching.
So did your defib get a bit of a workout, mate?
I tell you what, it nearly did. I almost had to go and book another appointment ASAP to get it checked out. So, look, I think in the first 3 quarters, I think in the first 10 minutes of the game, the Western Bulldogs were the much quicker team starting. And even throughout the first quarter, it looked like Western Bulldogs were far more likely to score and put pressure on the scoreboard. But St Kilda, they managed to hang in. Their whole back line was outstanding, I thought, St Kilda, for some of the pressure they were under.
Yeah, Hunter Clark and Dougal Howard and Jake Carlisle, they were spectacular.
Yeah. Look, I think Hunter Clark is going to be an absolute star, and he's already starting to show some of that silky poise.
He's got some hips on him, that kid.
Yeah, no, that's
he
it.
can shake and bake anyone.
I've heard that he actually just bathes in oil so no one can grab him. That's the only way he must do it. But
it works, mate.
I'll take it any day of the week. So, and then once they, managed to play their really quick kind of rebound 50 football, they use the corridor an exceptional amount. And then it helps when you've got, Max King took a few big clunks and Membry was
terrific.
Really good as well. And Geary, I thought, even though Caleb still had 25 touches, and
Geary really held Daniel to account, I reckon, and he took a few very strong contested marks. And Geary's obviously not a big, tall bloke, but just in the contest, he's very strong and able to, he reached out that one on half back with a one hander.
Yeah,
I think ended up in a Butler goal. Did it end up in a Butler goal?
Membry goal might have been, but yeah,
it might have been a Membry goal. Yeah.
No, but I thought that he was really good. And look, for the first 3 quarters, they played exactly well. And then I think they got comfortable with their lead. And that's full credit to the Western Bulldogs as well, to maintain that grit and determination. I think that the result almost, and at the end of the day, they had more scoring shots as well, far more inside 50s. Although I think the way that St Kilda played in that last quarter really throws some of those stats off, just because they allowed Western Bulldogs to dominate so much. But they did that through their own skill. The Dogs in the last quarter really started to win their contested ball, started taking marks. Norton got onto a few. So it was just a great game, really.
Yeah, and also in other football news, I know you're probably not a big follower of the South Australian National Football League.
No, but the grand final is today.
No, not next week, the week after. So North Adelaide have booked a spot in the grand final after a win over Woodville West Torrens.
Goodness me. Have you got a team that you follow over there?
Yeah, I like the Bays, Glenelg, the Tigers.
They're in contention as well, aren't they? Or
knocked out today by South Adelaide. I do have a bit of a soft spot for North Adelaide because of the fridge. Yes. And Oleg Markov and Shane Edwards. I do have a bit of a soft spot for Norths. But go the Tigers. But obviously their premiership defense went down today. Just they were never. They played a few very terrible games this year, the Bays, but
that's enough of your tangent on some bloody South Australian football, mate.
I think it might have been the Waffle Grand Final today, actually.
Okay. Well, while you're looking that up, look, Paddy Ryder sustained a hamstring injury. He's been declared out for the season. So in terms of what that decides next week for St Kilda's team, I think that it will just be the one swap, given that everyone's fit. I think Josh Battle will come back in for, after his foot injury. It'll be interesting to see, because I think that St Kilda would really have liked to have played 2 ruckmen against Richmond, and try and get some dominance over Nank. And it would have had to have left a question mark to see whether they keep Chol in, but they're going to have to do that with Marshall as their main man forward for the rest of the season.
So, the grand final is today in the Western Australian Football League, and played out between Claremont and South Fremantle. And South Fremantle are up 14-7 at the moment.
Are you a bit of a Claremont fan? Aren't they the Tigs as well, or are they the Blues?
They are Richmond colours,
but they've got the Carlton similar logo as Carlton. Yeah.
No, I'm more of a South Fremantle bloke because of Marlon Pickett. I haven't really followed the Waffle ever, but since Marlon Pickett sort of jumped ship, I've been a bit of a South Fremantle bloke.
Yeah, I know that Claremont has a few St Kilda, old St Kilda players that missed out on playing any first team action. There's Tom Ledger, and there's someone else I can't remember the name of.
Yeah, well, South Fremantle have had a fair few blokes come into the AFL. Obviously, to your mob, Matty Parker.
Yep.
obviously Tim Kelly for Geelong now, West Coast, and Marlon Pickett for Richmond. So, yeah, they're a bit of a breeding ground for
Yeah,
some
good breeding ground,
half decent
absolutely.
players. Yeah.
So we may as well dip into the last final, which is obviously my pick of the finals
Oh yeah,
played out.
absolutely.
What an awesome game, really! What an awesome game. I was so surprised how Collingwood just went out and
Mm.
I thought that they'd have that kind of mindset, where they're not going to be defeated by all the external noise, such as the news articles and the crowd and all the isolation. But in the way that they played as well, they were so aggressive, and that they looked like the alpha team, just really battling it out inside the midfield. I think it helped, Mason Cox having a huge first quarter, 3 marks, 3 goals. So he's starting to show that he just maybe rocks up for finals footy. So something you'd know about, Ned.
Yeah, mate. No, I'm sort of pleased for Mason Cox. Obviously, he hasn't really done a whole heap since that, but no, it's good to see that. Obviously he's been under a lot of scrutiny. Um, really ever since the grand final. I think he kicked 1 or 2 goals in the 2018 grand final, but he hadn't really done a whole lot since. But no, it's good for the confidence of Cox. And I think when Cox is playing really well, Collingwood are very hard to beat. And I think that's what we saw last night. And I think Geelong will have their work cut for them, especially if Selwood doesn't play.
Absolutely. And I think that this win will be an influence, in a positive light, that it's really going to get them up for a semi-final. I think that's almost, given this year, that's the second hardest trip I can see anyone doing, is going over to WA. I think the only harder one is going to Adelaide against Port Adelaide.
Yeah, I reckon you've hit the nail on the head right there.
So,
I'd probably disagree a bit. I think probably going over and playing West Coast over there is probably just a bit harder than going over and playing Port, just because of the crowd. I think the crowd factor has been a real big thing for West Coast, but
yeah,
each in their own. Yeah, they're both very difficult tasks, and
I don't think West Coast hadn't
congrats.
lost over there this year, had they?
No, they hadn't lost a game over there this year, but yeah, full congratulations to Collingwood. I think they proved a lot of people wrong. I didn't pick them when we did our tips earlier in the week.
Yeah.
But as the game drew closer and I listened to a few people speak, like Rex Hunt, and even just the mindset of watching him on AFL 360 with Adam Chalor, they were really keen to go in hard and hot at this game, and that's what really changed my mind.
That's it. Yeah, no, it's an absolute credit to the way that they went about it. And it's probably a really good indicator and a sign of how teams should tackle it. And it's also interesting to see that there's still 4 Victorian teams left through all of this bubble stuff. So I think if that's the case, I think if not, it just, makes the claim bigger that this year is no asterisk. And if there's ever going to be an equal season, that this might be a greater sign of that. So I know we didn't speak about this previously, Ned, but I think it'll be good in going with what we've done so far with teams that are no longer playing, is that we'll just go and have a quick review of their season and whether they see it as a success or a failure. So we may as well start with the Dogs, as they played in the first final. What do you think of their season in general? Do you have that as a pass, or were you expecting them to be knocked out in the elimination final?
I think they're thereabouts. I think they made it last year. Obviously, the potential for the Dogs is huge. We saw that. 4 years ago. I still think there's a few holes. The good players are really good, but their bottom players are not so good. But I think the Bulldogs, I think next year they should be looking for a top 4 spot. Obviously, hopefully, we'll be back playing, Victorian teams will be back down in Melbourne. Etihad's a real fortress for them. Sorry, Marvel is a real fortress for them. And, they don't lose there much. And if they're able to get, their 11 home games there, I'd be very expecting them to be hosting a home final next year.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat with you, Ned. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. for all the hype that they received, which, is deserved, they never really seemed to hit their full potential, or what we believe to be their full potential. So I don't think that you can say that this year has been a failure just based on them. They still finished in 7th place and all that, but I think they would have been a bit more hopeful to at least make it through to the next round. Now, in terms of them looking for someone in the off season, and this might be a bit left field, but I want to throw this name out to you, Ned, and I'm going to tell you why. I reckon that they should either go for Todd Goldstein or they should go for Braden Pruce.
Yeah, Tim English was destroyed yesterday.
Yeah, and look, I think
made a fair point, but I just want to back up a bit from what I said about the Bulldogs. That they should be looking to being, hosting a home final, but yet again, it's very hard to gauge when you've got realistically St Kilda, Bulldogs, Melbourne, GWS, Carlton, Fremantle, and Essendon, who are sort of all fighting for a final spot. And that's the thing, it's hard to say if a team's been a failure or success when realistically at the start of the year, there's probably, there's generally that top four that you look at. There'll generally be that top four. And then there's the bottom four, the teams that probably won't make finals. And then there's a whole gap in between that can potentially make finals. So it's so hard to gauge, so much of it's just luck of the draw. You play you play against a team with a few injuries, or, you get, you may get the benefit of the doubt against the umpires in a few games. Depends who you play at home or who you play away. So it's hard to gauge, but I personally think the Bulldogs should be on sort of top of that whole
group.
Well,
that's just what I was about to say. I'm going to put the pressure on you now.
5 to 14.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to chuck it straight on you. Start of the season, where did you have the Dogs finishing?
Oh, gee, I don't think I actually had that. I don't think I really had my ladder.
I'd say I'd picture the Bulldogs from the start of the year, all the potential that they've got, the stars that they've got. I'd have them, in alongside that cluster. It should be like 5th to 12th, but I would have had them being 5th at the very top. Them in GWS, I would have had as my 5th and 6th place.
Yeah, I would have had them in my finals. I can't fully remember but I would have had them in my finals because they made it last year and they were bullied last year, and the only way was going to be up for them.
Yeah, well, it's interesting now that. So, what is the next call for them? Do they need to go be aggressive in the trade?
I don't think so. I think it's just an internal thing that they just need to click. They have, they have some decent defenders. Obviously Alex Keith. Caleb Daniel, good user of halfback. They got Norton. Bruce was here and there, and they've got a stunning midfield like Bontempelli, McRae, Liberatore, Hunter, Tim English. He's only going to build.
Well, that's the thing, and that's why, if I can just butt in, that's why Braden Pruce, I feel, could be just. He's not going to be a superstar, but I don't think they really need a superstar. They need someone that's handy enough in the ruck, and then someone that can go forward as well, because English is handy in the forward line. He's capable. And I think if you start chucking all of them up, but then you got to remember they've also got Shaki that, hasn't been getting much game time as well. Is Sam Lloyd, is it?
Sammy Lloyd. Yeah, he didn't play.
Yeah, it's interesting that Harley Dale's also not getting a gig at the moment. So you think they've got the resources. Yeah. I think that's a bit of an interesting case, the Western Bulldogs.
They have the potential to be a top 4 side, absolutely. But it's just getting it all to click at the right time.
Yeah,
we know, and you've seen it from a Saints perspective this year, and I've seen it from a Richmond perspective throughout times this year. It's just so hard to get it all to click.
Yeah. Yeah, so well, on that, we'll also review West Coast season. How did you find it? And is it a failure, success, or call it even Stevens?
I'm going to be very harsh and call it a failure.
Yeah,
I think
I'm inclined to agree with that. I reckon it has been for them.
Their first 5 weeks, we don't condone swearing, but was shit house. They coughed up some really terrible games, and the thing is, they didn't cough up those games. They'd be sitting with a double chance, but they relied so heavily on being able to go back home, and they were able to do it, and they were able to go back home, win every game. But realistically, and the fact of the matter is, you got to win away from home, and they weren't able to do it, and they got to a crunch final, and they got beaten by Collingwood, who spent 90 days on the road.
Yep. No, I totally agree with everything you've said there. I think it didn't go into their advantage having a few players that were potentially not underdone, but just really lacking that kind of those game minutes. Cripps coming back in, stuff like that. But yeah, at the end of the day, they've rued games where they didn't perform at their best early on in the season, or also later. I think that Bulldogs loss comes to mind, and I don't know if you were if you're looking at West Coast at the start of the season, you would have had them, once again, maybe just even considering having them at top 4. So to bow out in an elimination final, I think it'd be
at home as well.
At home, and with the pickups, they were able to get Tim Kelly, arguably one of the best midfields in the competition. So, still a very good forward line.
They weren't started for good players as well. Like they've probably got nearly the best list in the comp for mine. They got such a deep midfield. Their defense is so good in the air.
They got a lot of stars, absolutely.
And their forward line, they've got 2. They got the Twin Towers. They got Ryan and Cripps. And you got the best ruckman throughout this year. And for them to bow out at home, that's huge.
Yeah. All right. So as we said earlier on, actually, I'll just give a quick update on our tipping competition. So we've decided to go with a new outline just for the final series. So if you guys had tuned in to our previous episode, we pick a team and the margin. So both Ned and I got 2 out of 4 this week. Both of us got the Richmond tip and the West Coast tip wrong. However, I have a margin of 75. And Ned, what was yours again?
So is that differential in the whole margin or just a?
Yeah.
So my whole differential is 90.
Okay. So I've got a 15-point cushion heading into the semi-finals, which we will have on Friday. We'll do an episode. I will try my very best to make sure that is up before the first bounce, and hopefully you guys can get your views in. Probably a fair time just to, thank everyone for tuning in and all that. And thanks for all the support that we've gotten. If you've got any buzzing questions, let us know, because it's always fun to talk about, and chuck our 2 cents in on it.
Buzzing question for you.
Yep. Fire away.
So obviously we had the NRL finals finish up this afternoon.
Yes, we did. Go Storm, baby. Week off.
So who wins the 2 games next week? So we have Roosters hosting the Raiders. Who you got in that one?
Oh, look, I'd have to go the Roosters based on this and based on how well they played against Penrith, who have been the best team all season, well, convincingly. I'd have to go the Roosters in that one.
I'm going to go the Raiders. I actually watched a lot of the game last night.
You're going to go the Raiders. You've been picking the Chooks all season long for a premiership, and then we get to the semi-final and you go on Canberra.
No, I'm a big fan of the Roosters, but watching the Raiders last night, they didn't click out of second gear, man. They were.
I'll take your word. You're a bit more experienced on that sport than me, so I'll take your word for it.
And then obviously we've got Parramatta hosting South Sydney.
Yeah, look, Parry had a few injuries last night against the Storm, and Rabbitohs, I don't know, weren't there for the first 15 minutes today, but then ended up doing it pretty convincingly and clinical after that first half an hour. So I'd have pretty hard to go past the Rabbitohs based on the way they played today.
I'll be going the Rabbitohs as well. Bloody hope the
well, beautiful. This is becoming Ferg's footy fanfare of all footy codes. So we'll have to chuck in our EPL tips next week.
Yeah, well, what about the Brumbies winning the Super Rugby the other week?
I don't really care for the Brumbies. I'm more Rebels man myself. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I can't say I really get into my union. I am a fan of the Hurricanes, though. Across the ditch. I'm not a fan of the Crusaders.
Well, on that note, I'm going to have to leave before I belch you. Actually, there's one thing that we need to say now. We do need to apologize to all our fans in advance because things could be a little tense on Friday with the Saints versus Tigers semi-final. There could be just a bit of tension in the air. So apologies in advance.
Yeah, I will definitely not be on my phone in case I accidentally post something bad.
All right. Well, until next time, thanks, Ned.
Thanks, Jay.